This is WRUULP, Savannah, Georgia, 107.5 FM, WRUU.org. We are Savannah Soundings, community radio with global soul. You are listening to One Human Nation with your host, Sandy Batiste. This program will be talking about race and race relations in your community.
Welcome to the One Human Nation show. I'm your host, Sandy Batiste, and we are ready to go with another show about race reconciliation and trying to kind of make a little sense of all of the different things that go on in our community, it seems, from week to week. And not only when I say community, I mean the global community of the world we live in. But I primarily on the show focus on what happens in the United States. So it's kind of hard not to focus on what, the activism happening with youth that are kind of sick and tired of being sick and tired, I guess, of the inertia that has happened with gun control. So what I thought would be interesting for today's show it would be to kind of combine some clips from an activist from times past with thoughts on how this fits into what we're seeing today. So before I get started, I do want to remind you that the viewpoints expressed in the following program are not necessarily those of WRUU, its license holder, or its staff. And for this show, I do want to let you know that the following program may contain subject matter and realistic language that some listeners may find objectionable. Listener discretion is advised. There's not any profanity in this show, but there is some language because it's pulling information from an activist from the 60s. So I don't know how many of you knew what was historical about yesterday's date of February 21st for the year of 1965. That was the date that Malcolm X was assassinated. So I thought it would be interesting to pull together some clips and kind of provide a commentary as we weave this into the race reconciliation journey that still needs to happen in this country. And, part of this journey, I always emphasize it's what needs to happen inside ourselves. That's where we need to take the look and the close inspection, because there's so much of our own unconscious bias that we need to come to terms with. And that's very difficult to do because the thing about unconscious bias is you don't realize you have it. I don't realize unless I'm really intentional. I've gotten better at recognizing it, especially when I feel a specific tension about something that it's triggering something that's there that I hadn't really put my finger on. And I can tell you, as I was listening to some of the speeches from Malcolm X, it really was creating some tension in me. And I realized it was some of how my identity was formed and things that I heard at a very young age, because I was probably, 5, 6, 7 years old during the time of Malcolm X. So that's a very young age. And you would think, well, how would I even remember that? And what I remember is, the atmosphere around in my house, because the big thing was watching the news, right? And so there weren't many stations you can get the news on. So, it was, 3 or 4 stations. So you're watching the news, and there was always, it seems like the news emphasizing what was going on, and seemed to be a lot of tension about that. And of course, my parents would be having a conversation and I was kind of like eavesdropping on the conversation. But I'm taking all of this in. And there was a lot of controversy around Malcolm X. And but what I thought to start off in kind of going down this journey and this historical walk is to start out with a quote from Malcolm X. And here's what his quote says. One of the first things I think young people, especially nowadays, should learn is how to see for yourself and listen for yourself and think for yourself. Then you can come to an intelligent decision for yourself. If you form the habit of going by what you hear others say about someone, or going by what others think about someone, instead of searching that thing out for yourself and seeing for yourself, you will be walking west when you think you're going east, and you'll be walking east when you think you're going west. And that's a quote from Malcolm X. So I think that's especially timely because when he's talking about, nowadays in his time, he's talking about the early 60s. And here we are 53 years later, and we have youth that are taking action, that are being activists because they're tired of living in an environment in schools that is constantly threatening, where their protocol for the day is, okay, what do we need to do if there's a shooter at the school? What do we need to do to keep ourselves safe? And this is not only for the students, but also then for the teachers who, put their lives on the line for these students. And of course, other students that put their lives on the line for other students. And I really, part of my reconciliation with where we are in this particular time in 2018, and really for me, my awakening started in 2014, was really how violent the times are for kids going through school and growing up. I just didn't have that, and I know a lot of you did not have that when you were going through school, not that there weren't arguments, but you didn't have to worry about, somebody shooting you because they disagreed with you. So we're going to take a listen to kind of get a feel for who this person was as Malcolm X, because there was always kind of a mystery around him because he was always considered to be kind of this violent type person. And so let's take a listen to kind of what I call an introduction to his philosophy and who he was in his own words.
This afternoon we want to talk about the ballot or the bullet. The ballot or the bullet explains itself. But before we get into it, since this is the year of the ballot or the bullet, I would like to clarify some things that refer to me personally concerning my own personal position. I'm still a Muslim. That is, my religion is still Islam. My religion is still Islam.
And I just want to point out before we continue with this, that this particular video was, I want to say this was in 1964. I'll get the exact date, but I just wanted to give you that timeline just so you'll know when he made this particular speech. Yes, it's April 4th, 1964, and the title of the speech is The Ballot or the Bullet. So we're going to continue.
I still credit Mr. Muhammad for what I know and what I am. He's the one who opened my eyes. At present, I'm the minister of the newly founded Muslim Mosque Incorporated, which has its offices in the Teresa Hotel right in the heart of Harlem. That's the Black Belt in New York City. And when we realize that Adam Clayton Powell is a Christian minister, he has the Abyssinia Baptist Church, but at the same time he's more famous for his political struggling. And Dr. King is a Christian minister from Atlanta, Georgia, or in Atlanta, Georgia, but he's become more famous for being involved in the civil rights struggle. There's another in New York, Reverend Galamison. I don't know if you've heard of him out here. He's a Christian minister from Brooklyn, but has become famous for his fight against the segregated school system in Brooklyn. Reverend Cleave, right here, is a Christian minister here in Detroit. He's the head of the Freedom Now Party. All of these are Christian ministers. All of these are Christian ministers, but they don't come to us as Christian ministers. They come to us as fighters in some other category. I'm a Muslim minister. The same as they are Christian ministers, I'm a Muslim minister. And I don't believe in fighting today in any one front, but on all fronts. In fact, I'm a black nationalist freedom fighter. Islam is my religion, but I believe my religion is my personal business. It governs my personal life, my personal morals. And my religious philosophy is personal between me and the God in whom I believe. Just as the religious philosophy of these others is between them and the God in whom they believe. And this is best this way. Were we to come out here discussing religion, we'd have too many differences from the outstart, and we could never get together. So today, though Islam is my religious philosophy, my political, economic, and social philosophy is black nationalism. You and I, as I say, if we bring up religion, we'll have differences, we'll have arguments, we'll never be able to get together. But if we keep our religion at home, keep our religion in the closet, keep our religion between ourselves and our God, but when we come out here, we have a fight that's common to all of us against the enemy who is common to all of us. The political philosophy of black nationalism only means that the black man should control the politics and the politicians in his own community. The time when white people can come in our community and get us to vote for them so that they can be our political leaders and tell us what to do and what not to do is long gone. By the same token, the time when that same white man, knowing that your eyes are too far open, can send another Negro into the community, get you and me to support him so he can use him to lead us astray, those days are long gone. The political philosophy of black nationalism only means that if you and I are going to live in a black community, and that's where we're going to live, because as soon as you move into one of their, as soon as you move out of the black community into their community, it's mixed for a period of time, but they're gone, and you're right there all by yourself. We must understand the politics of our community.
If you just tuned in, you're listening to the One Human Nation show, and we're listening to portions of a speech, different speeches from MalcolmX. And if you're just joining, Malcolm X was assassinated February 21st, 1965, which would have been yesterday in 1965. So I thought it would be interesting to kind of take a look at some of his philosophies and what he was talking about 53 years ago and how that compares to what's going on now with the current events that are happening. So I think he would be in some ways very excited about of what's happening with some of the politics, because I do think people are becoming more awake, although he might be very disappointed that it's still like 53 years. And it's like, why has it taken this long? You know, what's happened? And, I can only use my I voice and speak for myself because, like I said, I only really became awake about race reconciliation and why it was important to be more active in your community in 2014, just based on things that had happened that, just got to the breaking point. But I think for me, there was a certain complacency in thinking that, well, this stuff is being taken care of or it's better now. And the falseness of that, because, we, are able to get education at a higher level, and it appears that things are well, and, you have different people that are doing well with where they are with their jobs. But then there's another segment that very easily is what is defined as the working poor, and it's not bad people, and it could be just as easily me as I transition back to Savannah and starting and thinking in terms of where do I want to put my time, energy, and effort in the period of time that where I am in this particular season. So we're gonna listen and kind of compare, and as you listen to it, please listen through the lens of reconciliation, because I realize as I listen to some of these speeches, what created the tension for me and what I remember then from my childhood was the fact that Malcolm X was a Muslim. And, I grew up Baptist, and it was one of those things that it did not align itself very well. So as you listen, work through the tension, if that's where you're feeling your tension is coming from, or really analyze, well, what's creating this tension for me that I don't really want to engage. I want to change the station, or I can't listen to this anymore right now because it's creating too much tension for me. So I think I've got all the clips pulled, but I'm going to do a quick little look here as I'm talking to you and get ready for the next little segment we're going to listen to, because he gets into talking about how important it is to vote and the power of the vote and what he observed. And remember, this would have been in 1964 that he was talking about this. So let's take a listen to Malcolm X.
And 1964 looks like it might be the year of the ballot or the bullet. Why does it look like it might be the year of the ballot or the bullet?
Political year. Because this is the year of politics. This is the year when all of the white politicians are going to come into the Negro community. You never see them until election time. You can't find them until election time. They're going to come in with false promises. And as they make these false promises, they're going to feed our frustrations. And this will only serve to make matters worse. I'm no politician. I'm not even a student of politics. I'm not a Republican, nor a Democrat, nor an American, and got sense enough to know it. 22 million black victims of Americanism are waking up, and they're gaining a new political consciousness, becoming politically mature. And as they develop this political maturity, they're able to see the recent trends in these political elections. They see that the whites are so evenly divided that every time they vote, the race is so close, they have to go back and count the votes all over again. And which means that any minority that has a block of votes that stick together is in a strategic position. Either way you go, that's who gets it. You're in a position to determine who go to the White House and who stay in the doghouse. You're the one who has that power. You can keep Johnson in Washington, D.C., or you can send him back to his Texas cotton patch. You're the one who sent Kennedy to Washington. You're the one who put the present Democratic administration in Washington, D.C. The whites were evenly divided. It was the fact that you threw 80% of your votes behind the Democrats that put the Democrats in the White House. When you see this, you can see that the Negro vote is the key factor. And despite the fact that you are in a position to be the determining factor, what do you get out of it? The Democrats have been in Washington, D.C. only because of the Negro vote. They've been down there 4 years. And all other legislation they wanted to bring up, they brought it up and gotten it out of the way, and now they bring up you. And now they bring up you. You put them first and they put you last. Because you're a political chump. In Washington, D.C., in the House of Representatives, there are 257 who are Democrats. Only 177 are Republicans. In the Senate, there are 67 Democrats. Only 33 are Republicans. The party that you bash controls 2/3 of the House of Representatives and the Senate, and still they can't keep their promise to you, because you're a chump. Anytime you throw your weight behind a political party that controls 2/3 of the government, and that party can't keep the promise that it made to you during election time, and you're dumb enough to walk around continuing to identify yourself with that party, you're not only a chump, but you're a traitor to your race. And what kind of alibi do they come up with? They try and pass the buck to the Dixiecrats. Now, back during the days when you were blind, deaf, and dumb, ignorant, politically immature, naturally you went along with that. But today, as your eyes come open and you develop political maturity, you're able to see and think for yourself. And you can see that a Dixiecrat is nothing but a Democrat in disguise. You look at the structure of the government that controls this country. It's controlled by 16 senatorial committees and 20 congressional committees. Of the 16 senatorial committees that run the government, 10 of them are in the hands of Southern segregationists. Of the 20 congressional committees that run the government, 12 of them are in the hands of Southern segregationists. And they're going to tell you and me that the South lost the war. You today are in the hands of a government of segregationists, racists, white supremacists, who belong to the Democratic Party but disguise themselves as Dixiecrats. A Dixiecrat is nothing but a Democrat. Whoever runs the Democrats is also the father of the Dixiecrats. And the father of all of them is sitting in the White House.
So you're listening to the One Human Nation show as we listen to some historical clips from MalcolmX, and this was from his speech of the ballot or the bullet from April 4th, 1964. And, you know, it's interesting how the pendulum swings back and forth, you know, so I'm not going to do a political analysis of that. I'll let you digest on that. It's interesting to, as we are 53 years later, to see in some ways how little things have changed. It doesn't matter who the political party is. And I think it's going to come up on one of the clips. It probably is the next one coming up, on identifying with a particular political party and what Malcolm X, his stance was on that. But before we do that, I just kind of want to double check something here and make sure that we are set up for the next flow. And I think we are. So we're going to take a listen to this particular clip that he's, and you'll hear a familiar topic about gerrymandering. And this is from 1964, and here we are, still dealing with this issue of gerrymandering. So let's take a listen.
In Washington a couple of weeks ago, while the senators were filibustering, and I noticed in the back of the Senate a huge map. And on this map, it showed the distribution of Negroes in America. And surprisingly, the same senators that were involved in the filibuster were from the states where there were the most Negroes. Why were they filibustering the civil rights legislation? Because the civil rights legislation is supposed to guarantee voting rights to Negroes in those states. And those senators from those states know that if the Negroes in those states can vote, those senators are down the drain. States go down the drain. And in the Constitution of this country, it has a stipulation wherein whenever the voting rights of people in a certain district are violated, then the representative who's from that particular district, according to the Constitution, is supposed to be expelled from the Congress. Now, if this particular aspect of the Constitution was enforced, why, you wouldn't have a cracker. But what would happen? When you expel the Dixiecrat, you're expelling the Democrat. When you destroy the power of the Dixiecrat, you're destroying the power of the Democratic Party. So how in the world can the Democratic Party in the South actually side with you in sincerity when all of its power is based in the South? These Northern Democrats are in cahoots with the Southern Democrats. They're playing a giant con game, a political con game. You know how it goes. One of them comes to you and make believe he's for you, and he's in cahoots with the other one that's not for you. Why? Because neither one of them is for you. But they got to make you go with one of them or the other. So this is a con game. And this is what they've been doing with you and me all these years. First thing Johnson got off the plane, when he became president, he asked, "Where's Dickie?" You know who Dickie is? Dickie is old Southern cracker Richard Russell. Look here. Yes. Lyndon B. Johnson's best friend is the one who is a head who's heading the forces that are filibustering civil rights legislation. You tell me, how in the hell is he going to be Johnson's best friend? How can Johnson be his friend and your friend too? No, that man is too tricky, especially if his friend is still old Dickie. Whenever the Negroes keep the Democrats in power, they're keeping the Dixiecrats in power. This is true. A vote for a Democrat is nothing but a vote for a Dixiecrat. I know you don't like me saying that, but I'm not the kind of person who come here to say what you like. I'm going to tell you the truth whether you like it or not. Up here in the North, you have the same thing. The Democratic Party don't do it. They don't do it that way. They got a thing that they call gerrymandering. They maneuver you out of power. Even though you can vote, they fix it so you're voting for nobody. They got you going and coming. In the South, they're outright political wolves. In the North, they're political foxes. A fox and a wolf are both canine. Both belong to the dog family. You take your choice. You're going to choose a northern dog or a southern dog. Because either dog you choose, I guarantee you'll still be in the doghouse. This is why I say it's the ballot or the bullet. It's liberty or it's death. It's freedom for everybody or freedom for nobody.
You're listening to the One Human Nation show, and we're listening to some clips from MalcolmX, and it's time for us to actually make some announcements. I can't believe how quickly time is going, moving along, and it's interesting because I can't remember which person that I can't remember which speaker or on which topic on which show that was really talking about how the politics changes. And it's very important to be informed and aware and not necessarily be aligned with any particular political party without doing your research. So we're going to take a break and come back and listen to more of some of the speeches from MalcolmX. And remember, what we're listening to right now is from 1964, and then we're going to listen to some of his talks before when he had a change in his reconciliation, which was after he spent like 5 months out of the country visiting other countries, and he came back with a different insight. And you really have to really get into the history of Malcolm X because it's a fascinating story, his biography, and the disconnection between the Muslim, the black Muslims here as they were when he initially joined, to what the breakoff was, and the controversy about that. And I'm not going to get in that to the show, but it is pretty fascinating. So we're going to take a couple of minutes here to do some announcements, and we're going to come back and continue on this reconciliation journey as we look at some of the topics from Malcolm X.
This portion of WRUU LP Savannah Soundings programming is made possible by a grant from Brighter Day Natural Foods, offering produce, vitamins, and supplements, and a deli and juice bar. Brighter Day is located at 1102 Bull Street at the south end of Forsyth Park. More information available at 912-236-4703 or brighterdayfoods.com.
Catholic Charities of South Georgia, as part of its social justice seminars, will present on Wednesday, March 21st, a talk by third-generation Japanese-American Roy Wesley about his family's incarceration during World War II at 7 p.m. at the Catholic Pastoral Center on Victory Drive in Savannah. For more information, call 912-201-4058. WRUU brings you the most diverse and passionate local radio programming on the air in Savannah. This all-volunteer and nonprofit community radio station accepts no money from any form of government. Our diversity and independence is made possible only through the generous financial support of listeners like you. We rely on your annual and ongoing monthly contributions to cover the many costs associated with bringing you our broadcast and web programming. If you are a contributor, thank you. If you are not yet a contributor, please show your appreciation of the role WRUU plays in your life by becoming a contributor in any amount. You can donate quickly and easily by credit card or check. Just find the donate and subscribe links at WRUU.org. Thanks for listening to and supporting WRUU. And you are listening to WRUU-LP Savannah, Georgia, 107.5 FM, WRUU.org. We are Savannah Soundings Community Radio with Global Soul. So welcome back to the One Human Nation show as we continue to kind of examine and listen to some conversations from the speech from MalcolmX. And kind of, I want to say in memory of his assassination on February 21st, 1965. And we're going to continue with listening to, as he gets more into some of the politics, but mostly also talking about why it's important to be informed.
Also, I am very pleased to see so many who have come out to always see for yourself, where you can hear for yourself and then think for yourself. Then you'll be in a better position to make an intelligent judgment for yourself. But if you form the habit of listening to what others say about something or someone, or reading what someone else has written about someone, somebody can confuse you and misuse you. So as Afro-Americans or black people here in the Western Hemisphere, you and I have to learn to weigh things for ourselves. No matter what the man says, you better look into it.
I'm going to pause this right here for a minute to let you know that the clip that you've listened to, I've transitioned into the last speech he made before he was assassinated. So he was assassinated on December 21st, 1965. So this clip is from the day before his house was actually firebombed. And so as you listen to this, you may hear him clearing his throat. A lot of that's from the smoke inhalation. So I just kind of wanted to give you a point of reference because we've kind of moved forward in time. So it could be a little disconcerting because we left off and we were looking at 1964, and now we're into listening to some clips from his last speech from February 20, from 1965. It was like a week before he was assassinated. So we'll continue on.
And a good example of why it's so important to look into things for yourself. I was on a plane between Algiers and Geneva, and it just happened that two other Americans were sitting in the two seats next to me. None of us knew each other, and the other two were white, one a male, the other a female. And after we had been flying along for about 40 minutes, the lady, she says, "Could I ask you a personal question?" I said, "Yes." She said, well, she had been looking at my briefcase, and she said, "Well, what does that X?" She says, "What kind of last name could you have that begins with X?" So I said, "That's it, X." And she said, "Well, what does the M stand for?" I said, "Malcolm." So she was quiet for about 10 minutes. And she turned to me and she says, "You're not Malcolm X." You see, we had been riding along in a nice conversation like three human beings, no hostility, no animosity, just human. And she couldn't take this. She said, "Well, you're not who I was looking for, And she ended up telling me that she was looking for horns and all that, and for someone who was out to kill all white people, as if all white people could be killed. This was her general attitude, and this attitude had been given her, this image had been given her by the press. So before I get involved in anything nowadays, I have to straighten out my own position, and which is clear. I am not a racist in any form whatsoever. I don't believe in any form of racism. I don't believe in any form of discrimination or segregation. I believe in Islam. I'm a Muslim. And there's nothing wrong with being a Muslim. Nothing wrong with the religion of Islam. That just teaches us to believe in Allah as the God. And those of you who are Christians probably believe in the same God. Because I think you believe in the God who created the universe. And that's the one we believe in, the one who created the universe. The only difference being you call him God and we call him Allah. Jews call him Jehovah. If you could understand Hebrew, you'd probably call him Jehovah too. If you could understand Arabic, you'd probably call him Allah. But since the white man, your friend, took your language away from you during slavery, the only language you know is his language, your friend's language. So you call for the same God he calls for. When he's putting a rope around your neck, you call for God and he calls for God. And you wonder why the one you call on never answers you.
So if you just tuned in, you're listening to the One Human Nation show, and we're taking a walk down history lane, and that's one of the wonderful things about technology is to being able to capture some of these moments from our history and just kind of seeing and thinking through. I wonder what Malcolm X would think of these times that we're in now, and the technology and how things have changed so much in the media. In some ways, it's changed tremendously because of social media. In other ways, it has stayed the same. And he talks about this, but this next clip that we're going to listen to, he talks about the press, because this is, the newspapers and television during the time that he knew it in the 60s, which is, I can't even imagine what he would think of the times that we're in now. So I want to provide this clip or this quote before we listen to this clip where he talks about the media. When the people who are in power want to create an image to justify something that's bad, they use the press. And they'll use the press to create a humanitarian image for a devil or a devil image for a humanitarian. They'll take a person who's a victim of the crime and make it appear he's the criminal. And they'll take the criminal and make it appear that he's the victim of the crime. So let's take a listen to his own words about the press.
One of the shrewd ways that they use the press to project us in the eye or image of a criminal, they take statistics. And with the press, they feed these statistics to the public, primarily the white public. Because there are some well-meaning persons in the white public as well as bad-meaning persons in the white public. And whatever the government is going to do, it always wants the public on its side. And whether it's the local government, state government, federal government. So they use the press to create images. And at the local level, they'll create an image by feeding statistics to the press, through the press, showing the high crime rate in the Negro community. And as soon as this high crime rate is emphasized through the press, then people begin to look upon the Negro community as a community of criminals. And then any Negro in the community can be stopped in the street, put your hands up, and they pat you down. You might be a doctor, a lawyer, a preacher, or some other kind of Uncle Tom. And but despite your professional standing, you'll find that you're the same victim as the man who's in the alley, just because you're black and you live in a black community which has been projected as a community of criminals. This is done. And once the public accepts this image also, it paves the way for a police state type activity in the Negro community. They can use any kind of brutal method to suppress blacks because they're criminals anyway. And what has given this image? The press. I was in Africa. I read about them over there. If you'll notice, they referred to the rioters as vandals, hoodlums, thieves. They tried to make it appear that this wasn't, they tried to make it, they did this. They skillfully took the burden off the society for its failure to correct these negative conditions in the black community. Took the burden completely off the society and put it right on the community by using the press to make it appear that the looting and all of this was the proof that the whole act was nothing but vandals and robbers and thieves who weren't really interested in anything other than that which was negative. And I hear many old, dumb, brainwashed Negroes who parrot the same old party line that the man handed down in his paper. It was not the case that they were just knocking out store windows ignorantly. In Harlem, for instance, all of the stores are owned by white people. All the buildings are owned by white people. The black people are just there, paying rent, buying the groceries. But they don't own the stores, the clothing stores, food stores, any kind of store. Don't even own the homes that they live in. This is all owned by outsiders. And in these rundown apartment dwellings, the black man in Harlem pays more money for it than the man down in the rich Park Avenue section. It costs us more money to live in the slum than it costs them to live down on Park Avenue. And black people in Harlem know this. And the white merchants charge us more money for food in Harlem. And it's the cheap food. It's the worst food. We have to pay more money for it than the man has to pay for it downtown. So black people know that they're being exploited and that their blood is being sucked, and they see no way out of it. So finally, when the thing is sparked, the white man is not there. He's gone. The merchant is not there. The landlord is not there. The one he considers to be the enemy isn't there. So they knock at his property. This is what makes them knock down the store windows and set fire to things and things of that sort. It's not that they're thieves, but they try and project the image to the public that this is being done by thieves and thieves alone. And they ignore the fact that, no, it is not thievery alone. It's a corrupt, vicious, hypocritical system that has castrated the black man, and the only way the black man can get back at it is to strike it in the only way he knows how. They use the press. That doesn't mean that all reporters are bad. Some of them are good, I suppose. But you can take their collective approach to any problem and see that they can always agree when it gets to you and me. When they knew that this affair, which is designed to honor outstanding black Americans, is it not? You'd find nothing in the newspapers to give the slightest hint that this affair was going to take place. Not one hint. Why? You see, you have many sources of news. If you don't think that they're in cahoots, what? They're all interested, or none of them are interested. It's not a staggering thing. They're not going to say anything in advance that's being given by any black people who believe in functioning beyond the scope of the ground rules that are laid down by the liberal element of the power structure. When you begin to start thinking for yourself, you frighten them, and they try and block you're getting to the public for fear that if the public listens to you, then the public won't listen to them anymore. And they've got.
So you're listening to the One Human Nation show as we take a walk down memory lane, listening to MalcolmX, who was assassinated on February 21st, 1965. So it gets me to wonder as I listen to some of his talk as far as what is going to be the narrative, the takeaway, the images that is going to be portrayed and created by the youth that are being activists against gun violence? And how different would it look if the majority of those youth were African American, if they were black and brown youth? What would be the difference in how their treatment would be. I can't help but think about that because, this is the skin that I live in, and this is the history that I have with this country, and there is a different way that things are handled when it's coming from a different source other than a black and a brown source. So it makes me wonder, because I still believe that there's this movement from these youth that are just they're sick and tired of it. I just wonder how that's going to be portrayed. And one of the takeaways or something that's come out of this that I heard was, should teachers be armed? And we're not going to even get into that because that's a whole nother show. I just, should teachers be armed? And there are enough teachers kind of speaking about that. So this is kind of a food for thought show, and listening to a historical perspective from someone that many consider to be a very violent activist. And I think a lot of that was attached to the fact that how he spoke, the words he used, as well as the fact that he considered himself a Muslim as his religion, as opposed to something that was more acceptable to Christian religion. And so as I listened to some of his talk, that in itself created some of the tension in me with some of the things he said, but I realized that was his journey, that's his truth, and in order for me to continue on my journey, I have to be open to listen and to hear, no matter how upsetting or uncomfortable it makes me. So we're going to listen to one more clip, because he does talk about some current situation, in his time, that still is relevant to this time now, and this is how it really relates to the masses with housing and with education.
The masses of our people still have bad housing, bad schooling, and inferior jobs that don't compensate with sufficient salary for them to carry on their life in this world. So that the problem for the masses has gone absolutely unsolved. And the only one for whom it has been solved are people like Whitney Young, who's supposed to be placed in the cabinet, so the rumors say. He'll be one of the first black cabinet men, and that answers where he's at. And others who have been given jobs. Carl Rowan, who was put over the USIS, who is very skillfully trying to make Africans think that the problem of the black man in this country is all solved. And this is the worst thing the white man can do to himself, is to take one of these kind of Negroes and ask him, how do your people feel, boy? And he's going to tell that man that we are satisfied. And that's what they do, brothers and sisters. So they get behind the door and tell the white man we're satisfied. Just keep me up here in front of them, boss, and I'll keep them behind you. That's what they talk when they behind closed doors. Because see, the white man doesn't go along with anybody who's not for him. He doesn't care whether you're for right or wrong. He wants to know, are you for him? And if you're for him, he doesn't care what else you're for, as long as you're for him. Then he puts you up over the Negro community. You become the spokesman. And in your struggle, it's like standing on a revolver anywhere. You run faster and faster, and the wheel just goes faster and faster. You never leave the spot that you're standing in. So it is very important for you and me to see that the only way that our problem is going to be solved, it has to be with a solution that will benefit the masses, not these upper class, so-called upper class. Actually, there's no such thing as an upper class Negro, because he gets the same hell as the other class Negro. All of them get the same hell, which is one of the things that's good about this racist system. It makes us all one. Quickly, if you'll notice, in 1963, everyone was talking about the centennial of progress. I think that's what they call it. 100 years since the signing of the Emancipation Proclamation, and they were going to celebrate how much white and black people have learned to love each other in America. You probably remember how they were talking in January of 1963. Well, if you had stood up in January at the same time that they were talking all this talk about a good year ahead, good things ahead, and told them that by May, Birmingham would have exploded and Bull Connor would be known as an international thug for the brutality that he heaped upon black people, if you would tell the people in January of 63 that John F. Kennedy would be killed, for his role in everything. If you had told them in January that Medgar Evers would be murdered and nobody able to bring his killer to justice, or if you were to have told them in January of 1963 that a church would be bombed in Birmingham with 4 little black girls blown to bits while they were praying and serving Jesus, why, they would say you're crazy. In 1964, they started out the same way. That was the year of promise. If you were to have told them while they were talking about this great year of promise ahead, you know, civil rights and all of that, what was coming, that before long 3 civil rights workers would be brutally murdered and the government unable to do anything about it, a Negro educator in Georgia brutally murdered in broad daylight, and the men who did it be known and the government not able to do anything about it. If you had said this in January of 64, they'd say you were not. Now they're starting out in 1965 the same way, talking about the great society, you know, anti-poverty. If you tell them right now what is in store for 1965, they'll think you crazy for sure. But 1965 will be the longest and hottest and bloodiest year of them all. And it has to be. Not because you want it to be, or I want it to be, or we want it to be, but because the conditions that created these explosions in 1963 are still here. The conditions that created explosions in 64 are still here. You can't say that you're not going to have an explosion and you leave the condition. The ingredients are still here. And as long as those ingredients, explosive ingredients, remain, then you're going to have the potential for explosion on your hands.
We've been listening to Malcolm X. Some have walked down history lane. Malcolm X was assassinated on February 21st, 1965. And as we get ready to close out today's show, I do want to leave you with this quote, as well as on a lighter note, to continue your journey through race reconciliation. It's not going to go anywhere. And in this quote from Malcolm X, the final quote for today's show, he says, "You're not supposed to be so blind with patriotism that you can't face reality. Wrong is wrong, no matter who says it." So I hope you enjoyed today's show. And on a lighter note, I did watch the Black Panther movie this week. I will tell you it was entertaining, and it was a really good lesson to continue looking through the lens of race reconciliation, especially on the topic of how we look at things from an ethnocentric point of view, and how this creates divisions about among different members, and this plays a role into our entertainment. And this is not the only movie that does this. Another one that looks at an ethnocentric point of view, which is an old one, is like My Big Fat Greek Wedding, which is an oldie. So there's plenty of it out there. It does penetrate our entertainment industry also. So as we close out today's show, I do want to encourage you to continue on your race reconciliation journey. And if you haven't subscribed to the podcast, I hope you do that. Next up is Sound Limit with Troy Stoner. I hope you have a wonderful week, and we'll see what the week brings on what topics we'll talk about next week as we continue our race reconciliation journey.